G'day, how are we all? I have not touched a wrestling game for many years, and it's been even longer since I stopped watching the WWE in general. 20 odd years ago, I couldn't get enough of the WWE games. Christmas was always exciting because me and my brother would always ask for the latest entry. I see the period of 2001 through to about 2008 as the golden age for wrestling games. Specifically, for me, it was Just Bring It all the way to Smackdown vs. Raw 2008 that occupied a lot of my time. There are two other games that are in that list, but we'll get to those later. No hate to the later games or older titles like No Mercy, I simply didn't play them. I did own Smackdown 2, but it was watching my cousin play Just Bring It that blew my mind because of the jump in fidelity and features. It might even be the first PS2 game I ever saw, to be honest. Smackdown 2 used entrances where the character model was basically walking in an empty void with their video playing in the background, so at the time, seeing wrestlers physically walking into the arena was just mind-blowing for me. This isn't a crazy in-depth review of every game, so I apologize if that's what you were hoping for, and I'm sorry that Simpsons Wrestling isn't here. Obviously that's an all-timer.
Ow! Ow! Whoa!
Alright, let's kick it off with Just Bring It. As soon as I saw what the character models look like, I realized how foggy my memory is, because it doesn't look like really that big of a leap from Smackdown 2. It's better overall compared to the PS1 title, obviously, but it's the fact that everyone looks so blocky and polygonal that makes the game seem even more dated. If you go back and watch footage of Smackdown 2, keep in mind it's a PS1 game, it actually looks really decent. Just Bring It, whilst having better presentation because everyone actually enters the ring and there's a referee and such, it almost looks as if it was originally being made as a PS1 title and then ported over mid-development, or perhaps the devs were still just learning how to best develop games on this new hardware. Creator Superstar is great, it's quite robust, and you can make some weird-looking shit. Moves can be picked out of a list that is extensive, covering your stance, melee attacks, grapples, and everything. This is mostly retained throughout all the other games. A lot of stuff is very similar. The Smackdown vs. Raw games are some of my most played, so I remember their soundtracks quite fondly. This memory has made me forget that earlier titles didn't have a bunch of licensed music, so instead we get a hard rock sort of sound for some of the background tracks, and then this arcade-like music that feels like I'm in the menu of a Time Crisis game. That makes sense given the dev team is Japanese, so I assume that the Japanese arcade scene is a bit of an influence in some capacity. Each wrestler has their usual walkout music, or at least the ones I played and fought did, not Stone Cold for some reason. The roster is a little on the limited side, apparently due to finalizing the roster just as other wrestlers were getting more screen time for the invasion storyline that was happening back then. Divas get the short end of the stick, with there only being 5 of them, whereas the year prior for Smackdown 2 there was 9, so that's a bummer. If you're at all curious about the exact rosters for this game, because I imagine it could be a make or break for some people, I encourage you to go to Smackdown Hotel. It has every game and includes the list of superstars and other info like key features, so you can go there and figure out what things you're after in a wrestling game if you plan on coming back to these earlier entries. Match types are quite varied with a lot of staples like Hardcore, Hell in a Cell, and you also have some special modes like one where you take on opponents one at a time and try to beat as many in a row as you can. My personal favourite was always Hardcore because you had different areas to fight in and also random weapons that would be scattered around. I remember Smackdown 2 having a fun season mode, but Just Bring It gives you this weird story mode where you can pursue the WWF Championship belt or take on a partner and form a tag team. You'll pick which path through dialogue, though it's not very rich in content. Nothing that is said seems like it's written for the personality of each wrestler, and it's rather generic, with the cutscenes themselves looking awkward and contributing to the dated feel. Between matches, you'll spend a limited time walking around the stadium and can enter different areas. This is used for when you're going out to find a tag team partner, or when you're trying to find that disgusting piece of shit, Vince McMahon. It's annoying as hell to walk around because it uses tank controls and you can't turn the camera when you're moving. I will say that despite the graphics looking dated, the animations are really well done. Whether it's Irish whipping someone or countering a grapple, everything seems to flow really nicely into the next animation, with only one instance where something truly janky happened for me. Even when you create your own taunts, you can add random shit into it and it does a pretty good job of playing the animation. I use an emulator for these games and have an Xbox controller, so if you don't know the PS2 face buttons of X or cross, circle, triangle, and square are A, B, Y, and X on the Xbox controller. I'll just refer to the one scheme going forward. A is used for punches and B for grapples, with the directional pad being your modifier for different moves. Each wrestler has two finishes and they're activated depending on the situation. So to keep it simple, someone like Kane, if you're facing a groggy opponent, you'll do his chokeslam. X is used for countering any grapples, punches, or Irish whip, and you've got the expected moves off the turnbuckle as well as rope moves if the opponent has been hit into them. This stays largely the same, with some changes only being left and right trigger becoming your grapple and strike countering, some new additions like being able to remove the turnbuckle pad, or the ability to perform a strong Irish whip, and eventually a slight change in grapple moves and how that works. I'll briefly go over it when I get to Here Comes the Pain. You can change who you're targeting by either cycling through opponents with the right trigger or holding the button to aim at the nearest person. Your tag team partner can be targeted, which can add a bit of confusion. Gameplay wise, it feels a little stiff, but at least it's responsive. Other than getting my ass handed to me because I don't know how to play it properly, it didn't feel awful to play. Overall though, I think this is interesting when purely looking at the history of the series. I don't think it has anything in particular that stands out over later games outside of 8 superstars being able to be in the ring at once and Fred Durst being an unlockable character, if that's what you're after. Especially with commentary as bad as it is here. It's clear there were very few lines recorded that needed to be stitched together with no concern for tonal consistency, and it's why you get moments like this.
It is electric in this arena tonight. Who's fighting who? We can't miss WWF tonight. Who do you think you're talking to? Michael Cole and Taz at ringside. How can you miss that? This is a sacred fight. Nobody can interrupt the match. Shut up. There will be no disqualification in the Royal Rumble match. Darkness choke.
Righto, one game down. Let's have a look at Shut Your Mouth. Whilst textures for the skin of the wrestlers still look flat, it's overall a very noticeable graphical improvement over Just Bring It, especially the faces. They're a lot more detailed this time, as well as the hair. The first person roaming returns, but now there's no timer, and you can turn the camera whilst moving around, and even run, so it speeds it up a little bit. Instead of the insanely short story mode, there is now a full-on season mode where you're rostered on each week, you can take part in the pay-per-views, and you can even bring in your own created character. Now with more options to literally shape them and create something even more horrific. The creation mode has been expanded even more by allowing us to create our own walk and running animations. Within this season mode, you'll take your character through essentially a pre-division called Heat, work your way up to Raw or Smackdown, and you'll still have cutscenes in between shows where dialogue choices can determine your match types and such. This is the game that allowed us to remove turnbuckle padding. Weapons have now been given a grapple move and special moves can be used, like with a chair for example, you'll do a DDT into it. The Hell in a Cell is how it should be as well now, instead of being basically a regular cage match like it is in Just Bring It. You can exit the ring and smash the door down, but be careful when it comes to running around up there. My favorite addition that just comes out of nowhere is that cars fucking explode when they've been run into enough times. The first time I saw this happen as a kid, I don't think I could breathe properly because I was laughing so much. So, graphics are improved, the season mode is way better, a few gameplay additions are very welcome, and an expanded creation mode makes this a much more alluring game to come back to, or even play for the first time if you're interested in the history of WWE video games. Just be prepared for some wrestlers to basically operate on a different level of difficulty entirely. I had a match with The Undertaker, and countering just seemed to cease working as I spent the whole time doing my best Monica Bellucci in Irreversal impression by getting my ass pounded. There's not really much else to get into because Just Bring It is basically a baseline that Shut Your Mouth improved upon instead of changing outright.
It's been a long time. Come yeah. Hey, yo, it's my life, my time, my rights, my rhymes, my grind, my struggle, hustle, sweat in my blood too.
Looking at clips between this and Shut Your Mouth, the models look pretty much identical. I think you can see Undertaker's face maybe looking a little better, but I'm not sure if that's just the different lighting making me think it's different. Kane's face, though, looks like it was designed very last minute, and I feel like that's due to his face reveal, which happened late in development, seeing as that occurred in June 2003 and the game released in October of 2003. I do prefer the lighting here. Shut Your Mouth looks a little more washed out. The crowds definitely look better, with 3D models now being used for some of the fans on the ground. 2D models are used for the rest of the stadium, but seeing so much movement from these newer models really adds to the overall atmosphere. What takes away from the atmosphere, though, is that there is no commentating or even an announcer for the ring entrances. The creation mode returns, with animations being able to be created again and using the same sort of editing timeline, and this time I thought I'd change it up and make a normal looking wrestler. Don't worry though, the controls are there to shape the character into something horrible. You've got experience points to use this time around for your stats, which come into play by giving you more power or making you have more speed and so on. To start with, you don't have a lot of points, so the idea is to take the wrestler through season mode and get more points to make them better. It's a good way to have a more involved personal journey where you're building this person up from scratch. Speaking of season mode, it makes a return and operates just like it did in Shut Your Mouth, but the conflicts and storylines that come about are apparently written by some of the actual WWE writers of the time, and that's meant to make people have more distinct personalities, and it creates more varied moments as you progress throughout the year. Choices are on offer again as well, which includes talking to the general manager and just outright asking for and getting championship title shots on day one of the season mode, which is hilarious. Hardcore is better than ever, with more things being available to interact with, and it still retains a lot of goofiness. Unfortunately, there are no cars to explode, but you've got other options like throwing someone into a locker or a scalding hot shower. Elimination Chamber makes its game debut. This and Armageddon Hell in a Cell are probably my most played modes across all the games made by Yuke's. Some more gameplay changes come about in this title. The head, body, and legs will change color the more damage that is inflicted to them, and this can stun the wrestler, make them bleed, or make submissions easier to pull off. The healthier the section is that's about to be submitted, the closer the dot will be for breaking out. Grappling had a bit of a change here. You now initiate a grapple using one of the 4 directions that relates to submission, quick, power, and signature. So with Brock Lesnar, if I start the grapple with down and B, and then press left and B from here, I will do some sort of submission type move. It just adds a little extra depth to the gameplay. Here Comes the Pain was a banger in 2003, and it's still a fucking banger to play now because of these gameplay improvements. Really, the only thing that's going to make Shut Your Mouth worth playing over Here Comes the Pain, in my opinion, is your preference and roster. We're looking at some very nice looking character models here. Instead of that sort of fake plastic look from Here Comes the Pain, the skin here looks very realistic. It's not just good for the PS2 era either, I think it looks good full stop. I didn't see any way to change the camera angle, so you're now stuck with the same angle they usually default to for the televised shows. There's a couple of things that make this title come across as a bit of a downgrade compared to the previous one though. No more custom-made running animations or taunts or anything. You can create your own belt, but they're quite expensive for even ugly parts, and in general look a little shit because the textures just don't have much detail in them. Create a Superstar returns at least. No fucked up monstrosities from me again. I might save that for the next game. Celebrations at the end of the match are gone for some reason. Hardcore no longer has multiple stages for you to travel between. Now there's just a single backstage area with some props to smash up, and I never understood why that change was made other than time constraints maybe. But it does kind of make me wonder why there wasn't more reuse of assets. Could they not have just used previous arenas? There are some extra gameplay mechanics, and I do go back and forth a little bit as to whether or not I find them to just be gimmicks or immersive additions to make it feel more like the WWE. Wrestlers can be tagged as dirty or clean, and once that dirty or clean bar fills out, you can enter a state where either none of your moves are reversible or deliver a dirty move that's as powerful as a finisher. Some other gimmicks are before a match starts, you can shove each other and the person that loses will be pushed over. A similar bar comes up when you slap someone against the turnbuckle. Bra and panties is here as a match type, which is probably a good time to talk about how overly horny this game is. You have divas dancing in the main menu, bra and panty outfits unlockable for the main menu, diva wallpapers, and in the season mode, there are even sex scenes. It's not out of character as the WWE loved leaning on some titillation. Anyone else remember that completely unnecessary Edge and Lita in a bed thing that happened? It comes across as bad taste coming back to it now, but I won't get on my high horse about it too much because back in the day when I was just a kid, this all seemed fun and appealing. And yeah, like a dog trained by Pavlov, I will still salivate when Stacy Keibler's music starts. I'm only human. With the lack in roster size for the women in this game as well, and just how they were usually used during this period, it does kind of undersell the women who provided memorable moments. We had the charisma and ring talent of Trish Stratus, the powerhouse who happily took on the blokes, Chyna. The skill that came from Lita, earning herself a spot as the third member of the Hardy Boys. It is good to see now that they're treated a lot more seriously and getting more attention for the right reasons. Music-wise, this game is very nostalgic for me, some great songs here. Season mode seems to build on Here Comes the Pain, where characters are written to have more distinct personalities, and is designed to make it feel like a regular WWE storyline. It can be a little dynamic as well, like Here Comes the Pain, so if you're contending for a title, you're obviously trying to beat the champion. If you're holding the title, you got to work on defending it. If you're doing neither of those, the game will put you in a storyline where you're chasing a diva to be your manager. To be honest though, if you're going to play some of these older games, I would still just recommend Here Comes the Pain over this one. And I seem to remember that being the case when I was a kid. Despite playing a lot of Smackdown vs. Raw, I have fonder memories of the previous game and probably put more time into it.
WWE Day of Reckoning.
Okay, let's take a quick detour of sorts. I was always of the opinion that Day of Reckoning 1 and 2 were actually better than the Smackdown vs. Raw games in some ways, and in general are just massively underrated. Unfortunately, they are lacking in features like matches maxing out at 4 people, there's no special modes or challenges. Graphically, the first game looks good, but not as good as some of the PS2 games, and hardcore in this series is even more stripped down than the first Smackdown vs. Raw, as you don't have any locations outside of the ring. What made me come back to these games so much and why I rate it so highly is the gameplay. Instead of the PS2 games being more of a simulation in some ways, Day of Reckoning feels like a brawler. Compare the animation and sound effects of a big boot between Here Comes the Pain and Day of Reckoning. Hopefully this all helps to get across what I'm talking about. Another way to put it would be something like the PS2 games feel a bit like a straight up fighter, something like Street Fighter or Tekken, whereas the Day of Reckoning games go for that more arcadey feel of a brawler like Double Dragon or Streets of Rage. One of the things I loved about the way they do the fighting in Day of Reckoning is you're able to hit multiple opponents with your strikes and either knock them out of moves, or whilst doing something like a suplex, you can hit somebody if they're standing too close. They'll actually take that damage. And because of that, I always wondered if the chaos with 6 characters being bonked around was too much for the engine or too much from a balance point of view. And so that's why they kept the maximum wrestlers to 4. This more involved physics also extends to weapons, where you're able to slam people onto something like a chair if it happens to be below them. Grappling has a quick move by tapping A and a power move that can be done by holding the button. A handy addition for this fighting system is that you can drag opponents freely before initiating the next move for the grapple. On top of limb damage, you also have a spirit meter that will affect how quickly you gain a finisher slot. Once you're in the danger zone though, you can instantly turn the tables and swap states. Weight is taken into consideration too, so with some wrestlers you might have to tap A quickly to pick them up. Finishes are done very differently from the PS2 games, where you enter finisher mode. Your character will do a taunt, and from here you can belt out as many finishes as you want, so long as you're still in the finisher state. The feel of the gameplay and the ridiculous stuff that happens, like getting smashed around for trying to sneak a pin in a fatal 4-way or climb a ladder, really does make coming back to the game today such a joy. I used to play these games a lot with my brother and cousins, and nothing would make us laugh more than fighting the referee and watching him suddenly counter us and deliver a harder smackdown than we ever could to him. It is pure chaotic fun. Character creator is really good, and even your entrance can be personalized with regards to the camera angles you choose, stage effects, and lighting. It's really good stuff. Unfortunately though, there's no custom taunts or custom animations or anything like that. The story mode I really enjoyed. It is a completely linear story that follows your custom character earning a spot in the WWE and going on an adventure full of friendship, betrayal, and vengeance. And yes, even a bit of reckoning. The whole story feels like a proper arc straight out of the WWE itself. With the sequel, I won't spend too much time on it because it is mostly more of the same, and that's not really a terrible thing. In terms of graphics, I wouldn't be surprised if someone looked at screenshots for the character models and second-guessed if it was actually a GameCube game. Despite me benefiting from an increased resolution by way of emulator, I have not downloaded any texture packs. Everything that you're seeing right now is just regular base game Day of Reckoning 2, and it still looks terrific today. The gameplay is still chaotic and a lot of fun with a new stamina system to manage. In this one, the AI seems tuned to interrupting attacks more often, so if you're not on board with how chaotic these matches can become, that can be a little frustrating. If there's a way to get the referee to attack you like the first game, I couldn't do it, so I'm pretty sure that was just fully removed for the sequel, which is a shame. Story mode is very similar to the first game in terms of structure and actually carries over with your same character. No import option exists though, so if you want the exact same person, you'll have to make them again from scratch. Be sure to check the roster if you're looking for particular wrestlers when going back to these old games, because Day of Reckoning 1 and 2 are kind of lacking in that department. Surprisingly though, there are some mods that actually increase the roster and give you a lot of custom characters that were never in the game. A couple of gameplay additions I really like for this one is submissions now have 4 different directions that you can push the C stick or the right stick if you're on any other controller. So while you're doing a submission, you can either obviously do damage to the opponent's limb, or if you're after a bit more stamina, you can use that as an opportunity to regain stamina of your own. If the opponent pushes the stick in the same direction though, they'll break out of it instantly. So it's a great little mind game in a way. And when it comes to blood, there's 3 levels of bleeding, and the more you're bleeding, the more that will impact your stamina recovery and such. I can totally see why someone might rate Here Comes the Pain higher, but for me, Day of Reckoning 2 still stands out as a GOAT of all time. I just wish we got all the same game modes and features as other titles from the PS2 entries for a Day of Reckoning 3. Smackdown vs. Raw 2006 is up next. I just don't really want to switch to it yet though. I kind of want to let some more gameplay of Day of Reckoning 2 play. Seriously, download an emulator and start playing it. If you're able to get some friends or family together to jump in with you, it's a blast. Okay, moving on I guess.
Now get the cards, the charts from my generation. I'll take the come on, let's get it on. Forget the loss, the money. We're in this together and through it all. They said that nothing's forever, and they refuse to see the change in me. Why won't they wake up?
I need a second opinion on this. Obviously, Day of Reckoning 2 looks better, it's not even close. But when I throw up screenshots of Kane, left is Smackdown vs. Raw, the right is Smackdown vs. Raw 06, I lean towards the older game looking better. Let me know your thoughts. Most likely an emulator issue, and this happens in this game and 2007, is that wrestlers have this weird ghosting effect around them, and I don't know if that's because there's this sort of different look for the entrances. It's almost like it's using a pre-render of the graphics engine rather than it being real-time like it is with the gameplay. The pre-match minigames make a return. They can be selected in this entry and I guess feel a little less gimmicky for me. Some submission attempts have the same drama they would in real matches with how it's represented by the referee lifting the arm to see if the person is passing out or not, and you know, they keep it up and it's all dramatic as they break out of it. It's good stuff. Unfortunately, we still have to deal with a creation suite that will never quite be what it once was, but the game makes up for it in some ways by being rich in match types and season mode content. Except for hardcore, my beloved. You can't just freely travel between all these various and fun arenas to fight in like in previous games. What you do get instead are these backstage brawls, and I'm just going to let this clip play for at least a few seconds because you'll understand that it's one thing to lose the ability to freely travel and have all these funny interactable things to do. It's another for the game to just sound so lifeless and devoid of atmosphere. Entrances can be customized now, a bit like Day of Reckoning, except it's way slower trying to customize anything and actually preview it. More replayability can be found here for the season mode because certain wrestlers are assigned different storylines. If you're going to play this, make sure you check a list to see who gets their own storylines because some are repeated for certain wrestlers. There's a bunch to experience and it branches out and is a lot of fun to experience. Gameplay is still fun, even if I miss the chaos of Day of Reckoning. I don't think I'm a fan of the stamina system, only because it sort of feels like it creeps up on you more than Day of Reckoning 2 ever did, but that just could be because the bar is hidden. At the very least, you can manually recover it. There is no recovery button in Dave Reckoning 2. Righto, the big addition to this game, General Manager mode. It's kind of boring. I remember being a kid and finding it exciting. Now it's just a series of menus as you slowly increase the popularity of wrestlers and raise money to have more and more elaborate matches to gain fans. Each show gives you 2 promo opportunities to do things like run ads, promote rivalries, slander the other show, and a few more. You also have to manage your superstars' mood as well as the cost of their contracts, and if you really want, you can participate or watch the matches instead of just simulating them. I was kind of keeping note of matchups and recording which tag team would win so I could give title shots to the deserving people and such. It was expanded upon much more in later games, so it's not something I'd go out of my way to play. If you are coming back to these older games, a second player can actually control the other brand, so you can have this fun little rivalry going on and make it a little more enjoyable. Graphics don't really seem all that different from 2006. A massive change we do get though is the control scheme. There's still the general baseline of grapples, heavy grapples, strikes and everything, but now it's done with the right analog stick, and I had completely forgotten about that despite playing a lot of 07. Getting used to it was a little hard at first. I think I do like the change though, and being able to do these control grapples does add more to the gameplay that kind of elevates it above 2006 for me. Creating entrances is a little better, but still agonizingly slow compared to Dave Reckoning 2, and I shed tears when I open a hardcore match and don't see the option to travel anywhere. Backstage brawls are back at least, now with one less location. How fun. General Manager mode returns with some improvements. In this one, you're able to hire writers to help push certain storylines as long as you use the correct wrestlers. For example, it might require 1 dirty and 1 clean wrestler. Rivalries can be created manually and they're much easier to manage, and there's also more promo options. As a kid, I spent a stupid amount of time in GM mode, but it's just not as interesting to me anymore. Season mode is similar to 2006, except in the little that I played, it seems less fleshed out. That could just be due to me not getting the storylines that have more going for them. The ones I did play were really short and didn't really have much in terms of cutscenes. I know I'm kind of breezing through these last few entries, and it's mainly due to realizing how much these games peaked with Here Comes the Pain and Dave Reckoning 2. Like, I always said those games were the best, but I do have memories of playing heaps of 2006, 7, and 8. I guess I'm now reliving what I would have gone through back then, where I just started falling off the later games because they couldn't quite match the highs of previous ones. Combine that with my lack of interest in the late 2000s era. Keep in mind, I basically stopped watching WWE altogether by 2007, so when this game came out in 2006, I was falling off it pretty hard. I think I just sort of yearn for a Day of Reckoning 2 or Here Comes the Pain style gameplay wrapped in a late 90s Attitude Era wrestling game with all the wrestlers I loved watching the most. So don't get me wrong, even though it sounds like I'm just completely uninterested in talking about these later games, I do recognize the fun there is to be had. And I imagine a lot of you had an absolute blast playing some of the online modes for these games. Unfortunately, I never got to experience that, so it's just something I missed out on. Righto, let's wrap it up with the last game I want to talk about. Alright. Some of this game is worse than I remember. Character models are good. Again, though, nothing compared to Dave Reckoning 2, and it's still not really that much of an improvement over 06 and 07. They all look largely the same. For some reason, there's no intro, so that bit at the start where I just went straight to the main menu, that is what you're presented with. You don't get a cool, musical intro like the actual shows, and I'm not sure why that was the case. pretty early sign of what's to come, you could say. The right analog stick is still used for grapples with the ability to drag opponents to objects and, flick the stick in different directions for specific actions again. And look, freeform running. Actual movement is now really slow and stiff. I think that was due to the new system being more realistic with how characters move about. And animation-wise, it does look really good, I'll give it that. It just doesn't feel all that fun to play. ECW is here, so surely we get some amazing hardcore style matches through the Extreme Rules match type, right? Well, the big innovation here is the intrusive zoom that happens when reaching for a weapon as a wheel opens and you select what you want. That is literally it. I just want to do something cool, like frog splash off a building in Times Square like you can in Here Comes the Pain, or elbow drop from a helicopter. Am I asking for too much? Season mode is basically general manager mode, just with one wrestler you control and level up, and manager mode is basically what you had in 2007, just with more options like training days in between the shows and ECW being present. The roster size just doesn't account for there being 3 brands though. You're stretched too thin. I recall having enough fun with it that I put many hours in, but the rest of the game is such a misstep. It's kind of a shame to end on such a sour note, and there's some things I'm not going to talk about, like the styles that offer some gameplay changes between characters. To be honest, I just don't want to spend more than the hour I already spent going over what I think is a pretty bad entry. Previous games are so much better despite how happy I was to be able to run in any direction. Oh, and before I forget, you are at the mercy to the game's targeting system. You cannot manually switch targets for some reason. I don't know why that was thought of to be a good idea, but it's very painful when you've got multiple opponents in a match. Just for fun, here's Kane from Dave Reckoning 2 next to his model in WWE 25. I got the game from a Humble Bundle, so I figured I'd do this real quick. Again though, sorry to end the video on a bit of a sour note. I did not remember 2008 being as it was. I recalled it being quite a lot of fun, but anyway, I'd love to hear from anyone watching what your favorite wrestling game is. I imagine there's a few out there that would probably give me a lot of entertainment. Maybe one day I'll give 2011 a go because I've read from a few people it had one of the best season modes in the whole series. I'll see what happens. Until the next video, have a good one.